It's been a week since the NFL draft's first round took place. We're looking at the best picks and the worst fits of the first round on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Football fans, welcome into a Thursday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. I am one of your hosts, Tyler Rowland, local expert from the Locked On Titans podcast, here with my co-host, Alex Clancy, local expert from the Locked On Cardinals podcast. First of all, Alex, glad to be back with you after we switched things up a little bit last week and excited to dive into some draft reaction on today's show. Before we do, want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit I have a competitive side, as Alex knows well, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. Join your friends and download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. Again, we're going over some first round draft superlatives here. Best and worst picks, best and worst fits. We're going to look at the best and worst trades as well. Before we dive into it, thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day, Monday through Friday, NFL content all year round, always free. Make sure you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. But Alex, I'm going to bring us out of the gate here because I don't want you to do it because it would be home cooking. But for my best pick, the best pick of the first round, I got Marvin Harrison Jr. for the Arizona Cardinals. All right, look, I said throughout the draft process that what the Cardinals need to do in the draft is stick and pick and get Marvin Harrison Jr. So you could trade around all you want and you can add draft capital and you can get more picks and do the do-si-do like they did last year to move up and move down. But at some point, NFL games are won by stud, blue chip, all pro level players. And Arizona desperately needed one of those in their wide receiver group to kind of set everybody in a decent spot. I like Michael Wilson. I like Greg Dortch. I kind of like some of the options. Obviously, Trey McBride at tight end. I like some of the options that they had. But getting a dominant, bona fide number one receiver, and I was excessively high on Marvin Harrison Jr. throughout the process. I made bets with people that he would go before Malik Nabers. I think Malik Nabers is a good player, but he is nowhere near the level of prospect of Marvin Harrison Jr., who I think is the best wide receiver prospect that's come out in the draft since Calvin Johnson. I obviously no home cooking for you because I'm talking Cardinals. I am a Buckeye, though, so maybe there's a little home cooking there. Can't get away. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of people agreed with that assessment of Marvin Harrison Jr. So I think it was so smart for the Cardinals not to get cute and just to stick and pick and get Marvin Harrison Jr. Do you agree as someone who covers the team every day?
Yeah, I was on the other side. I was trade back for the first couple months of the offseason. And then, I realized how much draft capital they had. They have their full slate next year. They've got more money than anybody knows what to do with to spend in the offseason next year. They don't need to get younger. They need stars. And I think the sticking and picking was right. And I did shift about, 3 weeks before the draft. And I think it was the right choice. So I agree with you on that. Now, for me, because we're going to be doing best trade, best value, etc., I'm going to pick names here that won't double up because I do believe two of the best picks made were via trade up in the first round. But if you're just going to do stick and pick at position, I think it's got to be Quinion Mitchell at 22 for the Eagles. This dude was supposed to go 11. This dude was supposed to go 14. How do the Eagles keep getting away with it? The Eric Holmgren from Breaking Bad. How do they keep getting away with it? With the Cooper DeJean that we may or may not talk about later, stuff just falls into their lap. Now, the Howie Roseman thing is interesting that comes out. It's like, Howie Roseman is your favorite mock draft aficionados GM because he takes all the big names that everybody says is going to be great in the draft. We have no idea what's going to happen, but he goes chalk as pertaining. He's a rankings salute, if I may.
Right.
But yeah, I think at 22, that's just like, what the hell are we doing here, guys? How did he fall that far?
Yeah, he's fantastic. And I know coming out of the small school in Toledo, but I think he proved himself at the Senior Bowl. A lot to like there. I agree with you. I had him going number 12 in my mock draft. I thought Philly was going to try to trade up and get him. They end up sitting there and getting him anyway. I think that's fantastic value. So I'm with you there. I know that you were saving some of the other picks you do like maybe a little more till later. I get what you're saying there. But as for your worst pick of the draft, and I know this is low-hanging fruit, you know what I mean? But I got to go with the two quarterbacks, Michael Penix and Bo Nix. I think the Michael Penix situation with the Falcons has been beat to death at this point with why that doesn't make sense. If you had conviction to take Penix there because you believed in him, then you didn't have conviction getting Kirk Cousins. It both can't be true that it makes sense to pay Kirk Cousins the money that you paid him. And then you take Michael Penix Jr., an older prospect who's pro ready and needs to play right now. It just doesn't make any sense to do that. But the Bo Nix trade, look, I've been a Bronco hater. We have not been high on what the Broncos are doing. And I thought, I can't stand Sean Payton at the end of the day. He sits there in the press conference. Yeah, I was actively involved in making the Vikings think that we were going to trade up. Well, all you did was benefit the New York Jets, who made the trade down one spot because you influenced the Vikings. And all that does is help somebody that's in your conference. So all you did was help the Broncos, who's in the AFC, against you, and you ended up overdrafting Bo Nix anyway. You got no benefit from that. You hurt yourself more than any benefit. So the Penix thing, everyone's talked about that. That's obvious. But for me, I hate the Bo Nix draft just as much. Bo Nix was a second-round prospect. And to take him at 12 with all the other needs that the Broncos have on that roster and all of the draft picks that they've been missing because they traded for Russell Wilson and because they traded for Sean Payton, to me, that was just insane. It was just insane to make that move. And for Sean Payton to cackle at everybody like he's the smartest guy in the room afterwards, it's just incredibly frustrating for me, is all I can say.
Yeah. No, agreed. And I'll stay in the AFC West for my worst pick. It's not about the player. It's about the team. Brock Bowers going to the Raiders doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. They drafted Michael Mayer last year. They misused Michael Mayer last year severely until towards the end of the season with Aiden O'Connell. They have so many other needs than what are we doing here, guys?
Yep.
You can't
That's a
just
luxury
draft a
pick.
tight end. Huh?
That's a luxury pick for a good roster, and that's not the Raiders.
Right. So that it befuddled me as to why they're I know he was best player available, but when it's tight end, it's just not. And I understand maybe he'll be a stud and they won't have to pay him wide receiver one money if he becomes their number one option when Devontae Adams inevitably moves on. But, when something like that, I'm just Raiders being Raiders, I don't really get it.
Yeah. No, what's funny is I ended up taking this category out of the rundown for today just because me and you, we get going. We talk too much. I got to try to, slice it down. It's like a movie director say, if you think you need to cut it, you need to cut the scene. You know what I mean? So I cut out, but I had my most overrated pick is Brock Bowers because while he may be a good player, there's just such a record of first-round issues with tight ends. And with, like you said, what they needed on the roster, that one just didn't make a lot of sense to me either. And I'm just, I think Brock Bowers is going to be a good player, but people acting like he's Travis Kelce, he's going to be that level. I think you're asking a lot from a guy to have those sort of expectations. So with that being said, though, we are going to move forward. We're going to talk about our worst fits and our best fits in round one and also break down the best and worst trades we saw in round one. And obviously, as Alex mentioned earlier, he's got some pretty good names ahead for you guys. So we'll dive into that. Before we do, though, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause here and talk more about Monopoly Go. And I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that. But there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you can unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers to trade with your friends. You get cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, and hilarious emojis you can use to taunt your friends when you smash their buildings and heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges, a ton of unique mini games like digging for treasure and robot pachinko. There's always new timed events to help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win and rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now for free on Google Play and the App Store. Game on. All right, Alex, let's continue this Thursday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. We talked about our best and worst picks from round one of the draft. Now I want to talk about best and worst fits in the draft. And I'll kick us off here. And if I pick what you're going to say, just cut me off and let yourself go and you explain. Because I know you had some guys you wanted to talk about. Xavier Worthy from the Kansas City Chiefs. Just a perfect fit. And I'll talk more about the other side of this later in the show. But for the Chiefs to move up from 32 to 28 with the Bills and get a wide receiver who broke the combine record in 40. Look, if it was any other team, you could have your doubts. But do we have any doubts here that Patrick Mahomes is going to get the best out of Xavier Worthy? And with having Marquise Hollywood Brown, they're going to get Rashee Rice back eventually. It's not like Rashee Rice is going to be suspended for a whole season or anything like that. It'll be 4 to 8 games, somewhere in there, probably closer to 4. And he's going to be back by the time that it really matters for the Chiefs. You just look at Xavier Worthy and you think, is this the new Tyreek Hill? Now, he may not be Tyreek Hill, but they can use him in the offense. And last year they were trying to do that with, not last year, but the year before, they're trying to do that with Kadarius Toney and trying to do that with McCole Hardman. And now they have a bona fide guy. And the thing about Xavier Worthy for me is he may be a smaller speed guy, but he can run great routes. He is a good route runner, and people underrate that about Xavier Worthy. So his ability to run good routes and play with speed, I just think that is such a perfect fit for what they need in Kansas City. And the big issue that everybody, the big stink that everybody had with Kansas City last year is they don't have good enough wide receivers anymore. Well, now they've added Hollywood Brown. Now Rashee Rice in year 2. Now they add Xavier Worthy. They have addressed that number one concern, and they still won the Super Bowl anyways while everybody was concerned about that. So one of the best, there are good fits here. I have another one that I'll go to eventually, but my favorite fit that popped out was Xavier Worthy with the Chiefs. I just love that.
Yeah, mine is Byron Murphy with Seattle.
Nice.
I think that this is one where it's like, this is what they do. Like, as you know, covering and talking about the Cardinals every day, it's like all the NFC West teams do is stock up on stud defensive linemen. That's all they do. Stud defensive linemen, stud edge rushers, and this is just another one who'll bolster the middle. And this is what it's going to be for, you know, Seattle, you know, for the next 7 or 8 years. I mean, it's just who it is. And I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Now, there's one for me that I think this is the one you're going to steal because I know you're a big O-line guy. It may not be, but Troy Fautanu.
Mine is O-line, though. Yes, that was it. Troy Fautanu, Steelers.
Yeah, it was the Steelers. It's like, this is what needs to happen for Pittsburgh.
Yes.
They need to be able to Le'Veon Bell it again. Like, they need to be able to have the best offensive line that keeps a deep pocket for whoever's playing quarterback. Russell Wilson is, you know, to his credit, one of the best quarterbacks ever taking hits and never getting hurt. He's taken more hits than most quarterbacks since he's come into the league, regardless of where he's played. They need to have the best offensive line in football. And I think having him on the interior not only will help the run, but will help Russell Wilson as he ages gracefully, or if it's going to be Justin Fields eventually.
Well, one thing that we've always known about Russell Wilson as well is he needs a fortified interior because he is a shorter guy. He needs to be able to step up in the pocket and be able to see things. So having a strong interior is important. And honestly, I know that, you know, they have Dan Moore out at left tackle, and, you know, the Steelers seem to be internally higher on him at left tackle than the rest of the league and the media happens to be. Even if the Steelers are wrong about that, you could put Fautanu out at left tackle and move him from the interior out to left tackle and have him play there in a pinch if you need to. He has so much versatility across the offensive line. I saw some scouts saying they might even try him at center. So I think that Arthur Smith's offense is friendly to offensive linemen. We could talk about how he misused the weapons in Atlanta all we want, but the Falcons had a good offensive line during the time with Arthur Smith. They got a lot out of Caleb McGarry and Chris Lindstrom and, you know, Jake Matthews. Like, the offensive line was very good. So I think Arthur Smith helps. And when he was with the Titans had one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. And then after Arthur Smith left, it didn't look as good anymore. So I think his offense and the way he calls plays really does help the offensive line. So to have a guy who has versatility to play all 5 spots if you need him to, and just has general good talent, like, we're going to get to one of my biggest reaches here in just a moment, but it is someone taking offensive line and taking someone over Troy Fautanu in the same division that didn't make sense to me, that I didn't like. But with that being said, what's your worst fit out there?
It's Jane Daniels. And let me, because this is maybe PTSD for the time with Cliff Kingsbury in Arizona.
You do know Cliff.
What did Cliff Kingsbury do to Kyler Murray? Clipped his wings. That's what he did to Kyler Murray. Who is Jaden Daniels? A taller, younger Kyler Murray. Probably not as talented. Kyler's got a better ball. He's more crisp. He's more of a traditional
has better arm
quarterback.
strength as a smaller guy too. It's kind of surprising, but he can definitely throw. That's one thing about Jaden Daniels people don't talk about. He doesn't have like a cannon arm. He does.
Right. So when you look at Cliff and you look at the dysfunction that was, the Washington Commanders and now new ownership, head coach that really isn't an offensive guy, and Cliff's coming in to run that offense with the guy with a similar skill set to Kyler Murray. When it didn't work, that baffles me. I don't know why they didn't take Drake May. I don't know why Drake May wasn't number one on their board. He's more of a traditional quarterback. He showed more in college than this one bonkers year when he's 24 years old playing against 19-year-olds like Jaden Daniels. Like, I don't get it. That one for me, and I'll eat my shorts if I'm wrong, but I just don't see the fit there, especially with the history of Cliff Kingsbury.
Yeah, that's funny because when me and David Harrison from Locked On Commanders broke down the first round, that was one of the ones that I pointed out, not necessarily the Commanders' mistake, but I loved the fit of Drake May for the Patriots because I think Drake May is the better quarterback long-term, so that made more sense to me. One last thing I want to mention here is I think Malik Neighbors is a shaky fit with the Giants. They have guys who work. If you go watch the tape of Malik Neighbors, he did his best work in the slot. Okay. And I think it may take him a little bit of time, and he's a younger guy. He needs to get stronger, learn how to deal with press coverage, all that. It may take him some time to grow into a dominant outside receiver. So I think he's going to have more of an impact on the inside. And I think a guy like Wendell Robinson is a slot only receiver. Jalen Hyatt can be like a Z receiver on the outside with a little bit of room, but Jalen Hyatt does good work out of the slot as well. I think Hyatt is not as good of a player as Malik Neighbors, not even close, but they're similar in their style with their speed and how they're going to play. So I think that the Giants needed a dominant X receiver like a Marvin Harrison Jr., like a Rome Odunze. And I think that putting a guy like Malik Neighbors, who has some off-field concerns, in New York City, I just think that's a shaky fit for the Giants, even if he is talented enough to be the number 6 pick. One last category I want to hit right here before we talk about trades at the end is the biggest reach of the draft. And I think we've talked about Michael Penix and Bo Nix enough to where those would probably be my answer, but we can go forward. To me, I just had to mention Armarius Mims getting drafted at 18 by the Cincinnati Bengals. I recognize he's 6'7", massive guy, good athleticism, all the talent in the world, but only playing 8 games, not doing the agility testing, like the injuries. The guy is always hurt. In some of those 8 games, he left hurt in those games, even though that he played. So to take him over Troy Fautanu, I think we're going to look back and be like, the Bengals are the Bengals for a reason. The Steelers are the Steelers for a reason. And time is a flat circle. Like, this is another example where the Bengals make the risky pick on high upside and pass on a much better player who's much more consistent. And if you're the Bengals, you want to have versatility across the offensive line to pass on Fautanu. I just think that was a crazy mistake, and Pittsburgh will benefit and the Bengals will not. And that is just why those two franchises are so different.
Yeah. And I think my reach, there's two. Jordan Morgan, I don't really understand why he went ahead of Tyler Guyton. I know I know they have different skill sets. I know Graham Barton is more of an interior guy, but Jordan Morgan going before both of those guys kind of surprised me. But my biggest one is Xavier Legette. Like, Xavier Legette has the biggest chance to be Denzel Mims. It's just like, or Nelson
Jonathan
Aguilar.
Mingo last year.
Or Jonathan Mingo. So
Jonathan Mingo.
They have enough receivers. They have enough. You don't need every single receiver. They traded for Deontay Johnson. They've got Adam Thielen under contract still. They've got Jonathan Mingo. Okay. They need everything else on the offensive side. So I don't understand why trading up, it didn't do much, just one pick, but I don't really understand why that was the choice. I know that, he's a South Carolina guy. He had a great year last year. He's shorter than what people thought he was initially. He was the buzz. He was going to be a 3rd round pick, and then he went all the way up to the first. There's always a couple guys like that every draft that just are off momentum after not doing anything between being in the 3rd rounder up to the 1st rounder. So it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, but it worked for Carolina. They got their guy. Alex Clancy, Tyler Rowland, locked on NFL Thursday. What are the best and worst trades? I get to go first this time. It's going to be awesome. First, Tyler's going to tell you something about FanDuel.
All right, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. Look, it's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and sadly, Alex and I's teams are both eliminated at this point. But FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. You can bet on who's going to win some of these series as well. I mean, I still like Denver to win the championship. How about you, Alex?
Yep. I think it's pretty clear.
Seems fair. And with the Porzingis injury with Boston, who knows if there's anybody going to take on Denver. Either way, make sure that you visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. It's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
Alex Clancy, Tyler Rowland, Locked On NFL Thursday. Thanks for making Locked On NFL your first listen, free wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Best and worst round one trades. Tyler, I am going to take 2 minutes here that you didn't know I was going to do, and I'm going to do this. Stop trading with Kansas City. What the hell is Buffalo and San Francisco doing? Do you understand? There is no benefit in helping the Kansas City Chiefs, even if you pick up an extra fifth or an extra sixth. It is drawing a line in the sand saying, no, we will not facilitate anything for you. I don't understand it, Tyler, especially Buffalo. What does Buffalo need? A wide receiver. What did Kansas City trade up for? Probably the best wide receiver left. And then they had to draft Keon Coleman at 33. He's going to be their wide receiver one in a desolate wide receiver room, and they're going to be hung out to dry. I don't understand why Buffalo would ever answer a phone call from Kansas City. I don't understand why San Francisco would trade back one pick in the second round. Who cares? Block their number. They have both of your numbers to the point of a dictionary definition of you ain't going to beat this organization. Why the hell do you continue to help them? So, with that, I'm going to start with the worst first. We start with the best each time. The worst by far to me is Buffalo trading out of the first round. By far with Kansas City. What the hell are we doing here, guys? What are you waiting for? You had a wide receiver drop. There were 9 of them. And you think Keon Coleman, who was ranked 7th, 8th on all of the big boards at wide receiver, is going to be your guy because he's taller than everybody else, because he has more mystique? What the hell are we doing here? Yeah. They just hand-picked, gave Tyreek Hill Jr. to the Kansas City Chiefs. Who cares what the pick package is to get out of it? That guy's going to be there for another 5 years. I don't get it. I mean, I don't get it. Why?
No, I'm with you. That's what I had written down as my worst trade too, because, and let me attack this from, not only are the Bills in a way helping the Chiefs, not only are they doing that, but Xavier Worthy would have been a great fit for Buffalo, because the problem with Stephon Diggs, and the reason that they wanted to get rid of Diggs, is because Diggs ceased to be a deep threat for them. And not only did they lose Diggs in that, but Gabe Davis was their downfield home run threat, and they lost him as well. So they have done nothing to address the fact that they need a downfield weapon. Josh Allen has a cannon, right? Josh Allen has a fire hose on his body, and you are not going to be able to take advantage of that if you don't have someone who can get down the field and win deep. So not only did they pass up on someone who would have perfectly fit at a huge need, but they gave that player away to their chief rival in the AFC, the team that they can't get over. It doesn't make any sense at all. I'm with you completely. For my best trade, I got the Jets. The Jets trade down one spot with Minnesota. I don't think that anybody was coming up to get J.J. McCarthy for the Jets. I think that they just swindled Minnesota into thinking that that was the case. And I think we've seen some behind-the-scenes stuff from Joe Douglas that points us in that direction as well. Let me just say one thing real quick before we go. According to James Palmer of NFL Network on the Steve Smith podcast, Agent 89, something like that, it's Steve's former NFL player, Steve Smith, Rashee Rice is expected to be suspended for half the season. So 8 to 9 games, which we kind of guessed at. When we said earlier 4 to 8 games, it was just a guess, but there you go. So that makes it even better for Kansas City that they were able to get up and get Xavier Worthy. Like, it truly doesn't make any sense. But yes, again, my best trade is the Jets. You go back one spot. Who knows if any other team were going to come up for J.J. McCarthy. Everybody says that Bo Nix was Sean Payton's guy. It's the guy that he wanted all along. If you follow Benjamin Albright from KOA, he works for the Broncos and does stuff there. He literally did like a puzzle tweet early in the day where if you look at the first letter of every sentence, it said it's Bo, because he knew that they were going to take Bo Nix at 12. So you think that the other teams in the NFL had no idea that Sean Payton wanted Bo Nix that bad? I mean, Sean Payton isn't a guy who hides things very well, even if he thinks that he is. So I like the move for the Jets to be able to drop down one pick, and then you get Olu Fashu. Everybody was talking about Brock Bowers. Maybe they want Roma Dunze. No, the right move for the Jets was to take another offensive lineman, because they have to protect Aaron Rodgers, and they got 2 offensive tackles that are 33 years old, in Morgan Moses and Tyron Smith. Getting Olu Fashu was the right decision, and to be able to get him, I would have been fine if they took him at 10. For them to get him and drop back one spot and just get some additional draft capital, home run first round for the New York Jets for me.
Yeah, and I think mine is the Minnesota Vikings for trading up for Dallas Turner, because Dallas Turner was supposed to go top 10. He ended up being there at 17. They took the 23rd pick that was Cleveland's by way of Houston, by way of Minnesota, and traded up 6 spots and got their edge rusher. Edge rushers do pretty well in Minnesota. Yannick Ngakoue, Daniil Hunter across the defensive line. They have a history of doing this. And I feel like, I mean, Jared Allen, they have, you know, a long history of being, and this is just going to be the next one. You know, and if J.J. McCarthy works, this defense is going to be good. The offense is going to be fine. And, I mean, we'll see what happens with Minnesota. And I did want to just circle back one last thing about Kansas City only trading up 4 spots to 28 and Buffalo trading back. It doesn't matter. It's the principle of trading back or giving any sort of opportunity to benefit, allow the Kansas City Chiefs to benefit. I know it's only 4 spots. It doesn't matter. That's a world. That's a world. I'm urinating on the phone before I answer it if Kansas City calls.
You can't let Kansas City get the guy that they want. No matter if Kansas City is like, hey, there's a guy we really want, you have seen enough from Brett Veach and that organization that they're probably making the right decision. And you letting them do that is not the right decision for you. So I'm fully on board with you. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Were there any other? Oh, and let's do this, Tyler. We've got 2.5 minutes. Biggest reach of the draft. I will allow you to have your 2 minutes of T'Vondre Sweat time if you'd like.
I think that I've rant and raved on the T'Vondre Sweat situation quite enough. It's been I've been under siege, quite honestly. So I won't bring that
Leave
conversation
Tyler alone,
too
man.
much.
Leave Tyler alone. He had a third round grade at most.
Fourth round grade for 38? Most people. Yeah. It was a reach by pretty much any standard. And it's funny, I was reading an article, I think Marcus Mosher from our Locked On Cowboys podcast, he didn't write it, but he retweeted it during draft week, where if you go back and look at players who are drafted way above the consensus board, like everybody wants to say, NFL teams know more than, you know, draft people on Twitter and blah, blah, blah. But if you go back and look at some of the draft picks that have happened over the last few years, where guys are drafted way ahead of their consensus ranking on the consensus boards with Daniel Jeremiah and our guys at Draft Network and blah, 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 all that stuff, like, it's usually a bad pick. The odds are that it's a bad pick to take somebody that much higher than what everybody else thinks they are. Like, so yeah, that's absolutely the case. I wanted to say one other thing. Let's finish on a positive. One underrated pick that I thought was Tyrion Arnold going to the Lions. They traded, we saw last year that cornerback was a tough spot for them in the NFC Championship game. For them to trade for Carlton Davis and then get Tyrion Arnold as late as they got him in the NFL draft when some people thought he could be a top 10, top 15 pick, I think that's a steal. So I wanted to at least take a moment and acknowledge that I thought Tyrion Arnold was a really good pick for the Lions.
Yeah, and then, you know, you went with those 4 corners in a row in the second round. I mean, Cooper DeJean, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Nate Wiggins, not Nate Wiggins. I can't remember who it was. Kamari Lassiter
and then Max Melton.
Yeah, and then Max Melton.
Yeah, Max Melton. Yeah,
it was wild. Hell of a draft. So much fun. That was such a fun draft.
It was a great time. What do we do now? Well, it's time for teams to get out there on the field. Mini camps are happening, stuff like that. And this time of year is when Alex really shines. I got to say, Very, very
Woo!
smart philosophical football guy. So we'll have some fun topics to discuss here over the summer. Make sure you guys tune in to Locked On NFL on Friday, and then all next week. Get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day. But that's going to do it for us today, folks. As I tell you guys every week, start your weekend early and stay safe out there.